Welcome. This is the first in a series of videos about the law of God, which I have entitled 1. I don't know how long this study may run. As you can see, I've set out a pretty ambitious scope. It is about the law of God and how it is related to the oneness of God Himself, and how it serves to unite God's people and eventually all creation. Let's start today with a look at Jesus' declaration concerning what He called the first of all the commandments and the second. In the Gospel of Mark, we read that Jesus was at one point approached by a lawyer who asked him, "Which is the first commandment of all?" Now, before going into the answer, let's consider first, why would you ask this question? For one thing, the Bible includes a lot of commandments. There are commandments about which foods may be eaten, about the roof on your house, about which fabrics may be used for clothing. And people being people, someone is always looking for an excuse to do things better, that is, more to his own liking than the law will allow. Worse still, people who do not love the law will seek out loopholes in special cases, or even invent reasons to disobey one commandment in the name of obeying another. By that way of thinking, it would be useful to have a ranking of laws. But I don't think that's what this passage is about. The lawyer in Mark 12 is not looking for ways to bypass the law of God. His question shows that he was thinking deeper than the list of commandments. He was looking for an organizing principle, an understanding of just what God is trying to accomplish in ordaining all His laws. He suspected the laws of God are not simply an arbitrary collection of rules, and his response to what Jesus told him suggests that he had already pretty much settled on the same answer. This is what Jesus said. The first of all the commandments is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." This is the first commandment. And the second, like it, is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Now, in the world of today, a commandment to love God above all seems quaint, old-fashioned, maybe even reactionary. The focus in the dominant humanism of today is on taking care of the earth and its people, and then, if there is a God, maybe we can spare Him a thought along the way. But the focus in the Bible is quite the opposite. If you do not pay first attention to God, you will not do any of the other things properly. So Jesus insisted on the first of all the commandments, and only when that was established did He allow the second, which is like it. The disciple of Christ will not be deceived by the world's thinking, but will adhere to the teaching of the Master. The commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength is the underlying principle of all other commandments. The second commandment is like it and does not in any way contradict it, but it is not the most important. There is a lot that we can say about these commandments. They are the starting point for this whole study. And in future videos, I hope to address a lot of the questions people ask about the law. But today I want to concentrate on something that Jesus said in the parallel passage in Matthew. This is what He said: "On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Again, there are a lot of commandments in the Bible, both in the law and in the prophets. But it seems reasonable, based on Jesus' comment, to look at just how all the law and the prophets are related to these 2 commandments. In the most basic sense, the connection is pretty straightforward, and you don't have to look hard to see it. This primary importance of love for God and one's neighbors is well attested in the New Testament. For instance, we have Paul's reasoning in Romans 13. He who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there is any other commandment, all are summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. And again we read in Galatians chapter 5, all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. These passages show how the commandment to love one's neighbor encompasses many of the commandments that are in the Old Law. But more important, they show how the principle works. Commandments in the law and the prophets can generally be understood in the context of worship or of living with other people. And the passages that we cited both are in the context of interpersonal relations. So it's easy to see why only the second commandment is cited. We should note, however, that even in this context, caring for one's neighbors, the first commandment is the root of God's law, as we read in 1 John chapter 3, whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? And again in 1 John 4, if someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, how can he love God, whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. And James gives us this neat little summary that pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. So the commandment to love one's neighbors is revealed by these passages as a corollary to the first commandment. That is, a man who loves God will take care of his needy neighbors and brethren, and conversely, one who does not take care of his brothers proves that he does not love God. If this is so, why do we need to have both commandments? For example, take the 10 Commandments, the core of the law of Moses, and these can easily be seen as two sets of 5 commandments. The first 5 are about your relationship with God. The first one commands you to worship Him only. The second one commands you not to invent your own ways of worshiping Him. The third one commands you to keep your oaths that you swear by His name, and so honor Him. The fourth one commands you to keep His holy Sabbath day, and so honor Him. The fifth one commands you to honor the parents God gave to care for you and set over you in His law. And also the second 5 are about your relationship with your neighbors, as we read in the letter to the Romans. So it seems reasonable to state the underlying principle of love in terms of these two divisions. With this observation, we can see that the 10 Commandments, and indeed all the commandments, provide detailed instructions on how to love God and how to love your neighbor. So indeed, the law and the prophets can readily be understood in terms of the 2 commandments Jesus cited, and the second commandment itself is derived from the first commandment. Including the second commandment explicitly reinforces the point that your relationship with God cannot be separated from your relationship with your neighbor. More than that, if love for God and one's neighbors will lead to keeping the law, then failing to keep the law shows that our love for God and our neighbors is lacking, or at least imperfect. More than that, the apostle makes it clear that love is necessary to any acceptable service. For he writes in 1 Corinthians 13, though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, though I give my body to be burned, and have not love, it profits me nothing. There's a basic reason to focus on the commandments of love as the most important commandments. The law of love is an affirmative commandment, as opposed to the mix of positive and negative commands that we see in the law given through Moses. That is, The collection of statements requiring "you shall not do a number of harmful things" is covered by one: "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." The commandments of love are more important than the others, since if you love your neighbor, you will not steal from him. But not stealing from your neighbor does not cause you to love him. You can dispel darkness with light, but you cannot make light by eliminating sources of darkness. So we are left with this question: if these two commandments cover the same ground as all the law and the prophets, and if in fact obedience to these commandments would lead one to keeping all the law and the prophets, why do we need all the law and the prophets? Come back next time and we'll take up this question.